think there's no question for now.
Okay. So what we will do today is we will continue with where we stopped. That is the entire set of slides for last week, and then we'll move on to this week's work. And if you have any questions, please stop me at any time. As usual, if you need to clarify something, it's better to clarify immediately. And we'll see how much we can digest this morning. And if we can't finish everything, then we will just continue in our next session. All right? Okay, so what we are going to look at today is basically the general setting for a classroom and how to go about handling students. What we did last semester was basically looking at how to come up with materials and the content of the lesson itself, right? So today we will look at the lessons itself and the people involved in the lesson and how and what are the factors to consider before you can actually stand in front and teach. All right. Okay, this is what we did last week. Okay, I hope you can still remember the philosophy of education of Malaysia. Right. All right, so this is from one of the textbooks, Teaching by Principles. Okay, so we have three areas: cognitive, affective, and linguistic. What do you understand by cognitive?
I think it is something that has to do with our brain, is it?
Okay, so anything to do with the brain is cognitive. Affective? Any idea?
What about our senses?
Affective is related to senses.
Yeah, I know. I mean cognitive.
Oh, cognitive. Not really. Cognitive is basically about the brain. So anything that deals with the brain, for example, like analyzing something, all right? When you see something for the first time, there's a lot of things that will go in your head, right? You'll be wondering, is this the one? And then you'll try to relate it to what you already know, what you're already familiar with. So generally, cognitive aspect is basically anything that deals with your thinking, your reflections, and in terms of how you analyze things. Okay. Affective, what do you think affective is? Affective domain.
I think affective is something that refers to feelings.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. So it refers to feelings, anything that deals with the heart. Okay. For example, if you idolize a singer or an actor and you happen to see the person in front of you, how would you feel?
Excited?
Excited. Would your heart beat faster?
Yes.
Okay. Would your legs like sort of tremble a bit and wobble a bit?
Yes, and I will feel nervous as well.
Okay. But would you be able to explain why your hands are moving like that, why your legs are moving like that, why your heart is beating so fast?
I think because I can see someone that I adore or like I like them so much. So that's
Okay.
why.
All right. So anything that deals with the heart is a bit like difficult to explain. All right. It's difficult to explain because it just happens. Unlike the cognitive domain, there's an explanation and justification for everything you do because it deals with your brains. You're trying to think and you're trying to relate what is happening to what you already know. Okay, so when this kind of situation happens, you meet someone or you see someone you like, and then a lot of things happen. All right, you may not be clumsy, but at that moment, you may look very clumsy. All right, but that cannot explain. You can't find a right explanation to justify that actions, that clumsiness, for example. Okay, so this is where there is this fine line drawn between cognition and affective domain, because cognitive domain deals with the brains, whereas the affective domain deals with the heart. It's about your feelings. All right, and the third domain here is linguistics. So what do you think linguistics is? What would it deal with?
Language.
Language.
Okay, so anything that deals with the language, right? Okay, so let's look at each one of these. Right. So what comprises cognitive principles? Okay. So cognitive principles basically focus on mental and intellectual functions. Right. So mental meaning, mental and intellectual means it's related to the brain function. Right. So the first one is automaticity. Right. Remember this word? Have you heard of this word before?
No.
No.
Okay. So automaticity is actually how automatic it is. Right? It comes from the word automatic. Okay, what does that mean? Like it says here acquiring language subconsciously. Right. I'll just put it in a very simple manner. Like you have the knowledge of the language. If let's say this language is something that you use in the house and most of the time, may or may not be your mother tongue, it could even be a second language, but you use it so often at home, so frequently. So what happens is that if let's say you speak and you happen to make a mistake, what will happen is there is this tendency to autocorrect. All right. Why? Because you have the knowledge of the language. The brain actually tells you, hey, it's wrong after you have said it. And then immediately you will correct yourself. You'll probably say sorry, and then you'll repeat whatever that is correct. All right. So this is where automaticity comes in, where we would like students to actually learn the language and then use it without them realizing that they are using the language properly. That is why it's called acquiring language subconsciously. All right. If you have only learned the language in school and then coming to university, you may find that there is a bit of a struggle in terms of corrections. Language usage, the production of the language, you know what words to use, what to say, but the correction, that autocorrect, may not be there because you learned the language consciously. So you're constantly thinking about whether you're using the right word, are you saying the right thing? So if you reflect on your third language learning, in those classes that you have taken, the language that you would produce in the class will always have this filter. You will always ask yourself, am I saying it right? Is this the right word? So there is constant thinking that goes on, and you are actually using the language consciously. Very scared of making mistakes. But when a language, when you have this automaticity, you don't have to worry about whether it's right or wrong because you know it is going to be right. Can you understand?
Yes.
Okay, that's the concept, all right? So, how does it work in a second language class? Yeah, especially in an ESL classroom, you will teach. Okay, for example, you teach grammar, you teach writing formats, and you make them read similar formats in reading classes, and then you talk about it. You have some discussions and so on. Then afterwards, when the student is supposed to write, you don't have to remind the student because all the knowledge, the rules, assumption is at the back of your mind. All right. So when you use the language, there is no filter that would stop you from saying what you want to say. It is a free flow of ideas. So this is what is called acquiring language subconsciously. You learn it, but then that doesn't overpower the usage of the language. You don't think too much of it. All right. So this includes resistance to the temptation to analyze language form. You have already learned subject verb agreement, but you do not stop after every sentence or before every sentence to decide whether it's the appropriate verb form because of the subject. You don't analyze so much. All right. The analysis is basically in terms of the context. So in this context, what kind of words can I use? All right. How you speak to your lecturer and how you speak to your friends would definitely be different. The language, the words, all right, the structure of the sentences. So a lot of things you would do with your friends, you would use the language which you wouldn't use with your lecturers, because with your lecturers probably it'll be a bit more formal. All right. So this automaticity is basically a subconscious way of learning the language. Right? So we hope that at the end of every class that students will use the knowledge as input, and at the end of it all, when they are out of school, hopefully they can use the language automatically. Like you are put in one situation, you are asked the question, you know exactly how to answer without much thinking involved. That is called automaticity. All right. Okay. So the next, any questions?